What you're about to hear is personal. These are our guests' opinions, their lessons, their lens. No employer, past, present, or future, is represented in this room or these conversations. Amy, it's great to see you. You look gorgeous as ever, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thanks, Miles. Super happy to be here.
Thank you. Time is valuable. I appreciate you spending yours with us and trusting us with the story. And I'd like to start with my signature three-part question as an introduction to you. I recognize you as a subject matter expert, but maybe others don't. So, Amy, who are you? Who are you becoming? And who have you been?
Who am I? I have worked for about 15 years in the intimate apparel industry, specializing in bras, across both lingerie and sports bras, across both design and technical design. And I would say that's a good example of who I have been as well, is I have often defined myself by my career. Who I am becoming is probably working through a little bit right now of how do I separate those two things from who I am and separating that from what I do. I think that's a big part of what we all go through as we mature in life. Um, and so I'm still answering that of who I'm becoming and who I want to be outside of what I do for work. And I think that's always been very interesting to me culturally. That when I've traveled abroad, that's never the first thing that gets asked to you of what do you do for a living. That is very much an American point of view of who are you and what do you do. We're so
Mhm.
ingrained of defining someone's value almost by what they do. And I really appreciate that kind of alternate perspective that I've been witness to when I've traveled abroad of no, who are you? Not what you do for a living. That doesn't concern me. That doesn't interest me. Um, so that's the part that I'm looking to discover still.
Well, that's what's so remarkably attractive about you. I met you at VS in New York at a seminar, an educational seminar that you were helping to host. And I was moved by the fact that you were with a organization that was having exponential growth and you had every right in the world to be anything but humble. And the value that you treated everyone with was the same ethos that you'd want to be treated with. And not everyone in the room adopted that. And because of that, it created what I felt was this gravitational pull of, I need this person to be in my life. I don't know you, but it's a rarity. And who are you and who are you becoming? I would add to that two things. I think you are a wanderer and a wanderer in the best way possible, creatively, always trying to learn. And I recognize you as one that's brand loyal, but not cultish and not drinking of the Kool-Aid. And so I appreciate that you leaned into the value of yourself as an individual, not a title.
Thank you. That's very kind. And that is the grounding in which I live is I try to treat the world the way I want to be treated, golden rule for sure. But everyone has value, much far beyond what you see on the surface. So um, I don't understand what you have to gain by playing a power dynamic, even in a corporate situation. Uh, Treating everyone as an equal, listening to what they have to offer. That's how you build relationships. That's how you build authentic relationships. That has taken me further than probably anything else in my career. Going to tangent for just a hot minute because that's one of the kind of aha moments I've had as we talk through like career and progression. I have only had one role in my, I guess, 17-year career journey at this point that I got specifically just from a resume and an application. Every other job has come from someone I know, someone I've worked with previously, recommendation of a coworker, former colleague. It's so much about who you know in the company you keep. And I really try to make sure that I treat everyone in a way that I want them to think as fondly of me as I do of them.
I want to sit with that for just a minute. You're known by the company you keep. I think there are many people in leadership that lose sight of the fact that they're human beings and that their own insecurities don't have to be a vulnerability in asking for help. And that gets us into a deep conversation on what is great leadership. But I'd rather spend our time talking about what is great design. And so with that, I recognize you're one of the founding members of the Bra Center of Excellence.
Indeed.
When you walked in on day one, what didn't exist that you had to build from scratch, and what surprised you most about how hard that build actually was?
Without going too much into kind of the nitty gritty of the business, I think the biggest thing was the company that I was coming into had been built as a shoe company and then became a apparel company, and it was never a bra company. And so I think that was the most exciting part about coming into the role, was this opportunity and honestly this empowerment. The leadership team told me on my way in, like, don't do things the way they've been done, do things the way you know they can operate in the industry. And that was such a lift off my shoulders, because it wasn't about learning the way that things are done. It was creating a new path. And I think that was what was so honestly engaging about the role, at least for the first 2 years, because you were building so much from scratch. Sure, it existed, but it didn't have standards, it didn't have process, it didn't have this thought and logic behind the development process, um, that brought it to actually function like a true intimate apparel company should. Uh, so that, I would say, has been the most challenging part, was just the shock of not knowing, of realizing what wasn't there already, um, from a structural standpoint. But that was also at the same side, like, the way that I felt so impactful just coming in. It's just like, yeah, let's establish what our sizing structures are, our goals, our targets. We walked in and, like, I had 3 different sizing structures for bras when we walked in. We've cleaned that up to 2. But even that, they're just like, you can see this, like, how can the customer find what they're looking for? Everybody says, like, bras are so hard. Well, yeah, but we're not making it any easier for them. So, how do we pare this down? And I think, like, that's maybe one of the goals I would always love to see in the future. Is, I think bra sizing is so complex and challenging that 80% of women don't know their bra size. Well, then why don't we make it easier? Why do we make it so it's so difficult to know, that there's no easy way to measure, that some brands are this, but some brands are that. Some brands, it's the number that you measure. Some brands, it's the number you measure plus 4 plus 5. What?
Right. Really well said. And that ambiguity, or the absence of that structure, is the celebration of, and an acknowledgement of, wow, I can add value here quickly. Even if it's small, I'm moving the needle. There's great progression down the line, which is outstanding. So let me ask this question. Do you have a mental model or a checklist, or like a gut check, some sort of repeatable way to assess whether a design or a concept is worth the energy, and whether it's going to land as a hero or a zero?
I think that's been part of the learning journey, because there's a lot of things that I could see value in and changing it, but that idea is only as good as the stakeholder and audience that I can pitch it to. So I recently did my master's in project management, with kind of a specialization in innovation, and that taught me a lot about looking at the scope and opportunity of an idea, to help evaluate it from that business perspective. I've had some ideas that I think could be revolutionary to the intimate apparel industry, but what it would take to get after them and the resources, like, you have to align that with where you are and what's available to you. So, like, in times of great prosperity, there might be a lot more leniency to go after those sort of bigger ideas, long shots, blue sky, that's going to change the industry. When times are challenging, it's much more about buckle down, what's the short term wins, how do we turn the business around? So, that's been one of the probably hardest transitions from, like, school, when you're taught to just be creative, dream big, innovate in this blue sky area and moment, to a true corporate setting where you have a bottom line to respond to, you have leaderships and stakeholders, you're a publicly traded company, that at the end of the day, like, it's all about how profitable you are. So, yes, big blue sky ideas are great, but you have to ground those in what is the impact to the business. Um, does it have a place in the current construct? Or is it a little too far of a revolutionary idea that the customer's not there yet. Because there's been a lot of those too that I've been a part of at Nike.
So you do have a stage gate and you do have a process where you're able to evaluate success, whether it's going to be short term or long term, and differentiate commercial immediacy versus innovation and disruption.
You do, and I think that's learned by your time in the business. And that's a lot of, a little bit just like given the opportunity to sit in, because there's so many meetings that your level depends what you get invited to. And that exposure is really what I have found helps me to make better decisions in the moment. So, how do I know what to push for? How do I know what is aligned to the business need? How do I know if there's a spot in the line for this innovation? I only know that if I'm invited into the conversation to hear the context, to hear the leaders speak about what's important, what's moving the needle, where our customer is evolving into. So I think there's a little bit of that's the personal growth journey I've seen over the last 7 years of just like coming in with these big blue sky ideas. And like, I'm a very creative person, very out of the box, like can come up with some very innovative concepts, but is it the right time? Is there a market? How do I use numbers to project what the opportunity is versus what a development timeline would look like, the resources involved to get there? That is really what I have learned, not only through my time at the business, but what I feel like that project management degree actually helped me to enforce and be able to better present my ideas in a way that is more well thought out, and that I can get more stakeholder buy-in and then get people on board to move it forward.
Intrapreneur and entrepreneur. I get it. You're intra in selling and entre in outward. And I recognize this partly as quieting your cleverness and meeting your audience and understanding where their incentives are, whether it's a corporate incentive or a consumer's need for a better fit. Which brings me to your LinkedIn bio. One of the goals listed there was to, quote, break industry standards, end quote. Which standard specifically are you looking to break? And was there institutional resistance that pushed back on that?
I have a tagline that I think I fully own and am allowed to speak to. My personal goal in life is to get rid of sponges for your tits.
Okay. So are we talking about the cookies and the bra sponges, or
We are
what are we
talking
talking about?
about bra pads, and I think specifically since I've spent my last
Sponges for the tits.
9 years on the sport bra side of things, like the crazy idea that we are taking this hydrophilic material that holds on to sweat and water, gets heavier as it absorbs, and we're like, that is the best thing we can do to support women.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind that we have not moved past other materials or explorations or ways to do this. And, you know, wherever that may be, I really hope in my day I am able to find a way to get rid of the sponges and find something that is equally supportive, but gets rid of so many of the challenges that I feel like we face. Because I think if we were building a sports bra from scratch today, I think it evolved from bras, and that's how we ended up with these bra pads and foam. If we had set out to build a sports bra first before regular bras existed, I don't know that that would have been the starting place.
Interesting.
It lends itself well to a lingerie style bra. It's soft, it's comfortable, it's cushy. But sport? Is that really what's best?
Yeah.
Or is that what was available?
I spent a minute in that category. I learned a lot. So I appreciate from a technical and a material perspective, and also from a biometrics and athlete insight point of view, what you're talking about. People outside the industry are most often surprised when one says the bra is among the most complex garments to manufacture. And I recognize that. I didn't until I got into the industry and deep in upstream with factories. I'm like, this is more complicated than a track spike. Walk me through what makes it technically brutal in a way a blazer or a sneaker simply isn't.
Mm. I think the biggest and like most obvious answer is soft tissue. A blazer fits the body, but it isn't meant to necessarily manipulate soft tissue in the way that a bra needs to. A bra has to take something that is naturally soft, pliable movement. It also has to function on this other level. Like your blazer is there to aesthetically look good and look polished. A bra has to support you through movement And I think like specifically that was the transition from lingerie style bras to sport bras is like there are clear metrics upon which your level of success can be judged. That is through vertical breast displacement, that can be through breast acceleration. And then I think additional complexity to that, no two breasts are alike. So, of course, we all know that breasts come in different sizes, but you're also talking different densities. And the way that women experience pain is different based on the density of their breasts. So, something that works for one person won't work for another. Some people's, breasts are set higher on their chest wall, wider on their chest wall. Bodies are not the same, breasts are not the same, but when you have something that is so tight fitting to the chest wall, to the body, and has to manipulate soft tissue, it is truly a work of engineering, not just a top layering piece to make it look pretty. To do that, it is not one material. That's the other thing. Like I think of like some other kind of apparel counterparts. It's like a teacher, it's a single layer of fabric. Sure, you can fit it tight, you can fit it loose, but at the end of the day, it's a single layer of fabric. There are very, very few, almost zero single layer bras. Bras are complex layering of components and stabilizers and meshes and wires and hooks and eyes and ways to adjust them to try to account for all different body shapes. Then you get into this whole nuance of, back to those sponges, and those sponges come in different shapes, sizes, layers of density in the foam to support different areas of the body. Some of them you want to press down, push up, push in, like everything has a different uh, function that it's trying to address. It's much closer from the folks that I have had the lovely possibility to talk to in building and constructing something as complex as a shoe as it ever would be to another piece of apparel.
Mm-hmm. I recognize the three dimensions in footwear: length, width, height, and then there's also flex attributions. So I recognize that in the bra and the soft tissue, as you had mentioned. And I really got switched on to fit in great detail when I was working in San Francisco with Third Love and what they had done to their fit profile and size. And I recognize the inventory liabilities with that. And you mentioned earlier about fit. I've heard staggering numbers of women that are not fitted properly and therefore not supported properly. And I'm curious how that happens at scale. And I'm curious from your perspective why consumer education, the retail infrastructure, and the industry neglects standardizing this or getting it as close to standard as one might so that there's a universal fit.
I mean, it would take the entire industry coming together to align around a fit to be able to create standards for measurement. But as it stands today, at least in the US, every brand dictates their sizing structure. So you could be a 34B in one brand, but a 36A sister size in another. Um, until the industry comes together and says that's something that we want to rally around. And even then, like different components that you use to build the bra, even if you have two 34B bras, could fit dramatically different. One company could use a bonded structure that has maybe a little bit more modulus. So that's going to feel super tight compared to somebody that maybe uses a super lightweight elastic as a bra band. And you're like, wow, this is so loose. So, sure, even the size and the spec could be the same as a standard, but the components and layering of those components varies so much in bra to bra. You'd never be able to create consistency. And I think even individual brands that have a single sizing structure struggle to create consistency across to their entire product base.
Is that not a problem? Standardization, consistency, at least within the brand's
There's
narrative?
that we've built to try to create consistency there, like beyond measurements. There's, you can take a bra band measurement and then you can take an extended measurement. So like you're stretching it to as far as you physically can in your hands and you're taking that measurement and like that can give you an idea of how much flexibility is in the bra. There's devices that they can measure kind of pressure on body for a bra. These are all tools we can use to create consistency, but they're just that, they're tools. So they're as good as the tech or the designer that knows how to use them. Uh, and even then, there is nuance that I feel like we don't fully understand as technology continues to evolve. There's things like Fabergé elastics that maybe, don't increase in modulus as they're stretched, so they don't act like normal elastic. Now you have so many like glues and adhesives that are being introduced into kind of our intimate apparel world that all react a little bit differently. There's silicone bases now being introduced that consistency, you can get as close as you can. And I think like we do the best we can with the tools we have, and we're constantly evolving the tools that we have. Um, but as far as the hopes of being able to get a standardization across brands, I mean that could be considered a brand's intellectual property. Their fit, I think Third Love's a perfect example of that. Like they've developed this half cup design, and like there's benefits and challenges to that, but that's what they've based their brand on and what they built it on. Like their fit is their intellectual property. So I can't imagine any brands coming to the table and being like, we're going to share that out so we can standardize and make the industry better. That's cool. I just don't think that's the way business ever works.
Sure, sure. So let's flip the script for a minute, but stay on the lane of fitting. When does a fitting happen in the development process, and what's at stake when it's too late, too early, or not thorough enough?
When does fitting happen? Fitting is the entire development process in my perspective. Yes, we're going to start by choosing materials, but at least from my role, I'm even involved in that area of design. When a first sketch comes through, I am helping to figure out how we're going to build it and construct it, um, so that we're landing towards the end goal. So we could see something and immediately I see the sketch and I was like, that's going to hike and be uncomfortable because your straps are too close together. Like fit is already happening in a sketch form when the first design is created. Um, it's always a consideration when we're talking through materials of, ooh, that material doesn't have nearly enough elastic and spandex in it. It's not going to mold properly. That's going to be a nightmare to fit. So once we actually get into fit, you'll fit a base size development for the most part, and then you'll have to do additional graded sizes because that's just the way bras work. It's not a simple mathematic equation. The other part that I think is very fun about bras and engineering is when we get back to that idea that every breast is different. So, like different tissue sizes, different tissue densities, those breasts all have different needs. So the way that we might build a 34B sports bra might be different than how we build a 36 double D or a 38 triple D sports bra. And we're adding in additional layers and construct to make sure support levels remain the same across the style. Will a customer ever see it? Nope. We got to make it look the same. But there are variances in the engineering and build that
Yes.
create that consistent customer experience across the size range. So fit happens throughout the entire development process is the way I would handle that question.
Oh, thank you. No, it's helpful to understand because occasionally I'll watch a sporting event and I'll see a garment, a jersey that's not fit properly, and I can look at it and say, "Oh, the shoulder seams are off. This doesn't make sense to me." And then I start wondering where in the process did something happen or not happen, or did a shape change? And that comes more from working upstream and closely with tech design. Um, and so I recognize that there's a gap there. But when we speak about gaps, I can't help but think about GLP-1 medication and how that's reshaping body composition at a population level faster than any design calendar is built to handle. Is that changing how a technical designer, technical engineer thinks about fit, size range, or what garments need to do?
I think that will be on a brand by brand case basis on how they want to serve that growing customer base. Um, I think a lot of brands are considering it already. Um, you know, how they evolve, and I think we're still learning about the needs of that customer base, whether it is density or skin, chafing. There's a lot that can happen, and I think it's going to take time to understand. I guess back to your earlier question of like when you have an innovation, what is the market potential? Like clearly this is an expanding market, but I think there's a lot of, at least in my research, variance in the needs of that market. There's some people that are like, okay, I just have a little extra skin, or there's people that go through, surgery to have the skin removed. Those are two different needs.
Yes.
So like, what are you, when you say like, yes, the impacts of GLP-1s, but there's so many different outcomes that can come from that. Some people that only lose 20 pounds and it's a little thing. There's people that go on these huge journeys of losing 150 plus pounds. I'm interested to see how the industry evolves. I think, talking specifically to my market of intimate apparel, like when there's huge fluctuations in weight gain or weight loss, like your tissue density can change. And so I think, that could be an area where women are looking for more support specifically, whether that is from shaping, whether that might be like a small uplift pad in the bottom of the cup that gives you more of a fuller round shape that you're used to seeing with yourself. There's a lot of tips and tricks I think that can happen. I don't know that we've yet seen all the implications that are going to come.
I appreciate that. And one of the reasons I raise it, there's a publicly traded company that services extended sizes for men. And they had recently mentioned in their 10K report a revenue miss against projection and attribute it to the changing of the body shape demand, especially for one that only services extended sizes for men. And so it got me thinking clearly it's going to affect not just casual and workwear, but it's going to go through every other garment that's made as the population gets taller, shorter, wider, stronger, whatever the case may be. So I
I think
appreciate those insights.
a real social reckoning that we're going to have because we've had this movement of, accepting all bodies at all sizes, and the industry's had to, you know, the plus size industry has expanded so rapidly to serve this customer need. Realizing, we all come in every shape and size. How are we making sure that we're giving that customer access to sport, or, something that they feel confident leaving the house in? As we're now reckoning with, potentially shrinking bodies, are we still going to have the momentum in the market to want to serve that customer? Or is she going to be even less served because now the market share isn't there to incentivize businesses to go after it? That's what I think is going to be really interesting to see. Are they going to get underserved even further than they have been because they're fewer?
Return on capital invested. Full circle from creative inspiration to corporate responsibility. But where there's white space and open opportunity, niche brands thrive. And you got to watch the niche hard because they are the silent assassins that come up and just suck market share from the established winners frequently.
And maybe that is where businesses get sharp in this market, where it's getting harder to compete. Like maybe the giants don't need to serve every single customer. I don't know. Like if we're talking, from a bras perspective, how many sports bras don't have strap adjust? A lot. And we're trying to hit this like middle ground of democratic fit of like we'll serve the most of the customer base because we don't have strap adjust because she doesn't want hardware on the bra. But that means anybody with a super short torso or a super long torso isn't going to be served by a majority of those bras. So we are already selecting a subsect of the market to serve by the choices we are making in design. I see that that is probably going to play out to your point of, maybe the large companies are hitting the masses, but maybe that is where the smaller companies can thrive and finding that niche of having, we serve the bras for the super tall and the super short. There will always be those niches. And I think there's other ways that companies can innovate and they can choose again, like where is their investment? Because to truly serve some of those customers, you have to spend a lot of time to do it right. And I think that's where niche brands can thrive, is because they can spend time, they can have, a panel of experts and advisors and clients that are the specific niche to help guide them. I don't know that, large company resources are going to be split so much. Are they able to invest that same sort of nuance and expertise that is required to develop for that niche market?
Very well said. I think there's a subtlety in not being stuck in the mushy middle, and there's a constraint where do you have enough of the resources to do the proper innovation so that you can be revolutionary, not just evolutionary.
I mean, back to your GLP-1 comment, like I could not today go design a bra that is right for that market. I need to sit with that customer. I need to understand how their body changes beyond tissue density. Where is their loose skin occurring? Where are the problem areas? I couldn't design something authentic without really deep diving in and spending time to understand the customer need, the rub, and the challenge. And I think that's maybe where the smaller companies will continue to thrive, is like they can pick, this is where I'm going to go deep. This is where I'm going to be authentic. And there's spaces where large companies do that. I think they just have a lot more pressure, to your point, on that ROI. Like, how much time am I going to spend investing in this versus what is the market size and what I can get out of it?
Well, I think that circles back to a question I asked you about your design architecture when I said, is there a mental model, a checklist, or like a gut check that you go through? And one of the things you didn't say, and you didn't say it because I think it's innate, it's like autonomic for you, is a deep, deep understanding of the end consumer. And that population, whether it's individual or broader, I think you take that for granted because you do it with such muscle memory. But I think that's essential for a new designer or brand coming up, is to be as close to the smallest viable community as possible and to know it intimately, from strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, so that they can develop product that is of meaning and is remarkable. But having shared that, and as we get toward the end of this pod together, I'm deeply curious and like to hit you with a concluding question. I'd like you to sit with it for a minute before you answer it. Amy, I'm curious from your perspective, what is great design? Not technically. There's a lot of product that's functionally forgettable, commercially successful, but not heroic. I'd like to know what great design is and what it means to the person wearing it, and how you know when you've landed on a great design concept when you're in the process of making it.
It's so hard because great design means something different to every customer base you're designing for. I think, in broadest terms, great design truly services its target market. And so I think of the vast gamut of organizations that I've worked for. Um, I have worked on bras and sleepwear for Kmart, and great design for Kmart can be a hot, trendy print, but at a price point or in a silhouette that is established. So there's very light design costs, and they can deliver that for the customer at $10. That is great design for that customer. But I also, as a designer, have such an appreciation for design that I see that makes me question how it was done, makes me scratch my head and go like, let me stare at this longer because I can't visually figure out how they did what they did. And sometimes that's construction, sometimes that's artistic and shape. Um, I was recently, coming back from Vancouver, and there was this sweatshirt in the airport of all things. Don't ask me why they have such a well curated shop in the Vancouver airport, but there is. Shout out to the Vancouver airport. They had a section of kind of like local artist goods that they were displaying in this shop. Um, and one of the sweaters that I saw, it was like an upcycled company, and they took old sweatshirts and t-shirts and created new breath and design from it. And this sweatshirt that I got had embroidery and applique and raw cut terry cloth, built flowers on it. It was beautiful, and like I knew from working in this industry, none of that is done by machine. Like all of that had to be by hand and executed. And I think that's maybe like a different element that I can bring because of the industry that I've worked in. But I looked at the price tag and it was like, I don't know, $230. And like, I was like, that's actually such a good value for what this is. And I know that sounds crazy because that's a $230 sweatshirt. Uh, but like, I saw great design in that. I saw somebody that took something unexpected and upcycled things that maybe would have ended up in a landfill and turned it into something so beautiful and creative. So, to your question, what is great design? It is different for every price point, it is different for every consumer. But what makes a great designer is how closely they can meet that consumer's need.
That's fantastic. My takeaway is great design serves a functional purpose, but moves you emotionally. And that emotion is subjective, and it's tied specific to the end use, but you have a connection so that the garment or the item is not simply a transaction or something that sits in your wardrobe. It can be a tool, it can be a resource, it can be a memento of a special time, and all that goes into it. That's why I got into product, and I know that's why you're deeply in love with making things better. Amy, I'm grateful to have you in my circle. I'm better because of you. You provoke me to think differently, not only about product, but about the way I view the world. And for that, I'm indebted. I'm excited to see what the future holds in design for you and what great unlocks you're going to throw down on the industry, because I know it's going to surprise a lot of people.
You're going to love when I finally get rid of sponges for your tits.
And that is going to be the best short clip we've ever pushed through social media ever. And I'm going to make you a t-shirt. And I'm just going to have sponges sewn on the front of the tee.
I can't wait to see the creative graphic design. I have it envisioned already.
I'm going to buy the Mr. Scrub Daddies from Shark Tank and put them on the front for you and send you and
a soft side against the skin. That's all I'm
Of course. We'll do it properly. Friends, family, and cohorts, this has been another episode of the Fight or Flight podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. Amy Toth is a subject matter expert, technical designer in demand, recognized as a thought leader and a human being, first and foremost. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share. Tell your friends. If you're moved to leave us a rating, we'd be most grateful. That's our lifeblood. And Amy, my bud, we're out of here.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Miles.
Yeah, that's a wrap.